You might say that flying is in my blood. Probably my first memory is of sitting on my grandfather's lap in a Cessna 150. I was about 3 years of age, and, though I remember very few details, that experience instilled in me a love of flying that has never waned. Several years later, my grandfather took me to spend some time on the observation deck at the Greensboro Airport in North Carolina. This was the mid-1970s, long before high-bypass turbofan engines and hush kits became the norm, and I remember the roar of 707s and other airliners shaking my chest as they landed and departed. Sadly, my grandfather never became a pilot. The budgetary limitations of a factory worker raising a family never allowed it, though I suspect he, like myself, rarely missed a chance to gaze up at the sound of a passing aircraft. He succumbed to illness before I started grade school, but my mother kept alive in my mind the person he had been. It wasn't until I was 21, in the summer between the 2 years of my registered nurse training, that I took the leap. I was making my money as an auto mechanic at the time, spending $150 per month on rent on a trailer in the woods, and started taking chunks of money to the airport to pay for lessons. Fix a car, take a flight. It was a pretty decent arrangement, and provided a much-needed diversion from the rigors of nursing school. It wasn't the fastest way to become a pilot, though, and it took me a year to earn my private pilot's license. It was a proud day when my check ride examiner handed me a temporary pilot certificate, and my dad took his first flight in a small plane. I must admit that it was also one of the worst landings I've ever made in my career, but he didn't seem to mind. At some point in that era, I acquired a copy of Guide to Bush Flying by F.E. Potts. This was the mid-1990s, and email had just become a thing. Inside the book, which I wore ragged, was an email address. I still remember it, fepotts@fepco.com. So I squeezed off an unsolicited email. It went something like this. Dear Mr. Potts, I have greatly enjoyed reading your book about bush flying, and as a recently minted private pilot, I would like to know your opinion of how I might go from where I am now to being a bush pilot. Sincerely, Wayne Smith. Mr. Potts, it turns out, did read my email and sent me a reply. My recollection is that it said, Dear Mr. Smith, become a doctor. Sincerely, F.E. Potts. Well, that wasn't what I wanted to hear, but it was what I needed to hear. His point was that I'd be better off making my money a different way and enjoying flying for my own purposes. And for me, that has been true. I didn't become a doctor until 2007, though, and never stopped flying. Aviation kept my budget very thin for other things, but I've never regretted the many thousands that were spent at the airport. In the following pages, I'd like to share some of the experiences that have given me enjoyment, memories, and, one can hope, some wisdom. 2 axioms have stuck with me from my flight instructors. There are old pilots, and there are bold pilots, but there are no old, bold pilots. And it is better to be on the ground wishing you were in the air than it is to be in the air wishing you were on the ground. I've been bold at times, and I've wished I were on the ground at times. So far, I've survived to tell the stories. Enjoy.